Good day and welcome to another edition of Crapper with my colleague Sean Hall.
Hello there.
That was very convincing. And myself, Tim Appleton. Now, today we're doing what we're calling, conceptually, um, another controversial album ranking, this time of the Beach Boys. We're calling it another controversial album ranking because our last album ranking, which was of Genesis, proved fairly controversial. I think it's fair to say. I mean, why? Who knows? I mean, I think there's the possibility of here of what the philosophers call a category mistake, which is that it's not quite clear what we're doing a ranking of. Um, and it's not really clear whether we're dealing with our sort of favorite albums in order, or like the greatest albums, basically, which is not necessarily the same thing, right? I mean, I thought it was more interesting in the Genesis one to just do our favorites because there's more to talk about there. Plus, the sort of if we're doing a ranking of the cultural significance of albums, then it's there's not much sort of subjective interest in it. I wouldn't say. I mean, I can accept that The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis is possibly their most culturally significant album, but that doesn't mean that I have to listen to it. Um, so yeah, we're doing the plan for today is to sort of go through our favorite albums, from like least favorite to most favorite. We'll see if we can generate a similar amount of controversy. We'll certainly try. I don't know if we'll manage it. Now we calculate there's 28 Beach Boys albums. Count them. We're not going to include Stars and Stripes. Is it called Stars and Stripes Volume One? I don't know. I don't know if there was a Volume Two, but we're not going to include that one because what's the point? Um, it has to be some sort of cut-off point. I think we're going to
Mm,
have to go fairly fast, otherwise we'll be here all
mm,
night. So
yeah.
gird your loins, Beach Boys fans. Here we go. And I think so. Sean, would you mind starting us off with your 28? I'm trembling with anticipation.
Well, you know, some of these have got to go somewhere. I mean, I tend to think the Beach Boys, it's like a lot of bands. I think it's like a bit of a jam sandwich. So from my perspective, you've got the golden period, sort of from the mid 60s to somewhere around 1973. And that's the jam in the middle. That's the tasty bit of jam. Then you've got two slices of bread. You've got a nice fresh slice of bread, which I always say is the early period where they're just coming to sort of some sort of fruition. And then you've got a slice on the top that's just starting to go off a little bit. It's just been left out too long. And
Is this a metaphor?
probably, this is a metaphor, and that's probably for me the later albums, which so I'm laying my cards on the table now. That doesn't mean that I don't like the Beach Boys. It's like a lot of bands, you know, God, they've been going for years, haven't they? Let's be honest, and trying to sustain that over decades is an achievement. So even the fact that, they made an album, when was it? Was it 2012, their
Hmm.
last
Yeah,
album? I
I believe
mean,
so.
you've got to give them some credit for that. I mean, I don't know whether I'd have the energy to drum or do anything at that age. So it's not that I'm slating. Um, I think they're a great band, but I've got to put these albums somewhere. So number 28 for me is Still Cruising, which
Okay.
I wrote down here is piss poor. Am I allowed to say that? So, um, basically, I think it was one reviewer said it was like an 80s band trying to be a 60s cover band. Um, I think it's got Kokomo on it, hasn't it? I think so. That's probably the highlight. I mean, I think the Muppets did a version of that, and that was really good. But that's not one of my favorites. It just feels a
Mm.
bit watered down and very sort of generic. sort of 80s style. So I'll leave it at that. I could go on.
So piss poor. That's the level of analysis we're going for tonight. I think that I mean I think that's a quote from the Guardian review, isn't it?
I think it
um,
might be.
yeah, I think the point you're trying to make, by the way, is a good one, which is that we do love the Beach Boys. I mean, I don't want any Beach Boys fans to get offended. You know, we're big fans, and so, but I think I was going to say a curate's egg, but I think your jam sandwich metaphor is perhaps more pungent. Um, All right, good. Well, now my 28 is not Still Cruising. It is Summer in Paradise from 1992.
Mm.
I think that really, by the time you get to this point, we're dealing with a simulacrum of the Beach Boys, really. And I think that when you stick this album on, by the time you get to Beach Boys do hip hop, Summer of Love. I mean, you find yourself sort of falling into a kind of, I don't know, what is it, like a sort of existential funk. I think there's a track on here called Still Surfing. And I was thinking, still surfing, still making bad records, more like, there you are. I'll let that joke hang for a second. I think the title track here is slightly charming. Comes in at the end, and I think it's got a certain charm against all the odds. But I mean, really, I think they've this is a big misfire. I think, and I'm sure no one would be particularly offended by us saying that at this stage in the ranking. It is going to get more positive as we go through. Let's say. All
Mm.
right, great. So there you go. Number 27, Sean.
Yeah, well, it's Snap. Yeah, I picked Summer in Paradise. I thought it had a slightly grunge feel actually. This album, it's got quite loud drums in the mix. The best I can say about it is that their voices are still intact. They're still pretty good. Apparently Van Dyke Parks is on it playing accordion, so that's good. But Brian's not on it, is he?
No.
So no, he's not there. But apparently, Blender, I don't know what Blender is. I don't know if it's an online review site or a magazine. It described it as a train wreck. And
Right.
apparently,
Good old Blender.
it sold so poorly that the distributor, Navarre, actually became bankrupt as a result. So it's never been reissued again, apparently. So, hang on to that copy.
I think it's not even on the streaming platforms,
Okay.
which is,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have to be grateful for small mercies.
Mm.
All right, good, thanks. So my 27 is The Beach Boys from 1985. Um, apparently, there's a press conference in the Soviet Union in the 1930s. Here we go. And a journalist said to Stalin, "Which is worse, the leftist deviation from communism or the rightist deviation from communism?" And Stalin said, "They're both worse." And that's how I feel about these bottom two albums.
Yeah.
They're both worse. I can't really. They could have gone in either order, really. I think I've put the Beach Boys. I think Pip's "Summer in Paradise" to the post because Carl's quite present on it, and I do like Carl's voice a lot.
Mm.
But yeah, this is not a good album, is it? The best thing I can say about this album is it's quite short, as a
Yeah.
lot of their albums are. Still, I've rarely spent 30 minutes, more keenly feeling the absence of Brian Wilson. I have to say, um, a particular low light is "Crack at Your Love,"
Oh.
which manages to be both incoherent and disgusting as a title. It has got one track on that I quite like, I have to
Mm.
say, but I forgot the name of it. And no, it's called, I think, She Still Believes in Love or something like that,
Yeah.
which is quite a touching title. It's got a nice Carl vocal on it. But apart from that, this is a forgettable affair. This is a lamentable affair. Um, all right, good. So
Right.
26, Sean, if you will.
26. Yeah. Okay. I've actually got an ordered crib sheet of all the Oops. So yeah, my 26 was the Beach Boys 85 on Caribou. Um, Again, I just put poor, basically. It's got an awful. I'm no fan of the 80s drum sound. I think, I'm a bit stuck in the past. I
Yeah,
cannot stand it. There's no Dennis Wilson, is there, on this? Because he'd gone and drowned, which was unfortunate, wasn't it?
terrible.
Um, so I think Eugene Landy's on it, isn't he? Brian,
Really?
yes, yeah, he started to gain some influence on the Beach Boys material.
Mm.
Ringo Starr's on it on California Calling. It's very, again, you wouldn't know it was Ringo. It doesn't sound like Ringo.
Yeah.
And I think Stevie Wonder's on it, but it didn't save it really, in my opinion. Yeah, terrible, terrible album.
Yeah, Eugene Landy was Brian's psychotherapist, I think, something like that. Yeah, and he tended to get a writing credit for anything he was in the room for. um, all right, great. Well, my 26 is Still Cruising.
Mm,
The creepily titled Still Cruising. That theme might come back. Um, this is barely an album, actually, because side two has got loads of sort of re-recordings. Um, I think part of the problem with these sort of like later albums is Mike Love sort of takes over a bit, and he's not much of a writer, is he, Mike Love? I mean, that's a sort of charitable way of putting it.
mm.
Um, I hope he's not watching because he's quite litigious, isn't he? Um, but the like as if we've got any money to give him. But yeah, I think you said this already. Side one is not totally hopeless, and Kokomo is the
Yeah.
final track on side one. That's all right, isn't it, Kokomo?
Mm,
Uh, that's where you want to go. Um, although Wipeout is a total disgrace,
mm,
the Beach Boys do the Beastie Boys, my
mm,
God. Um, anyway, yeah, that's good. So that's my 26.
mm, mhm.
Sean, could you give me your
Yes.
25, please?
Okay. Well, I've got Keeping the Summer Alive at 25. I just written Dire here. Um,
It's good that
actually,
it's good that you're
but
showing you're working.
um, uh, it's got good production values, I'd say, this album. They've upped their game a bit. Um, I think it's not all bad. I think, there's Oh Darling is a reasonable ballad. I think it's Carl and Al sing that one. Santa Ana Winds is sort of stereotypical Beach Boys. Bruce Johnston is producing on this. But All Music, if you know All Music, Rob
I do.
Theakston,
Mm.
right? Brother of Jeremy Theakston. I don't know, he's not, sorry. Rob Theakston,
Do you mean Jamie Theakston?
that's him, Jeremy, Jamie. Oh
This
dear.
is sort of like endless metonymy and then the sliding of meaning.
Rob Theakston referred to this album as the low point in the band's discography, ripe with mindless throwaways and lifeless filler. So, oh, but oh no, it is all bad. The new Rolling Stone album guide said the album was abysmal, and and it was in a string of inconsequential records that has not abated since 1978. So that was quite charitable.
It's quite chirpy.
Yeah, quite. But they sing well on it. I think
They do.
Bruce Johnson's had a good go at the production. It's not all bad. I'm not slamming them. I'm not saying, oh, they're awful for the sake of it. It's just that we know that they were capable of so much. And, it'd be like talking about Wings, for example. Paul McCartney's brilliant and Wings had their moments, but you could never say they were as good as the Beatles. I know that's a daft comparison, but I'm not slating the Beach Boys for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah. Okay. I'm just offended that you're slagging my number one choice, keeping the summer alive. No, I'm joking. But uh, I don't hate this album, so I'm gonna. It's much further up the list for me. This one.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I
Yeah.
wonder if there's a sort of if we're into a sort of reverse chronology here, and this that might be another way of thinking about this listing, but we'll see, we'll see. It's unlikely to hold up for the whole 28. Anyway, all right, good. So my 25 is now. This is where it's going to start getting controversial, I think. Uh, so brace yourselves.
Okay.
My 25 is Friends.
Mm,
I
wash
thought
that
that might be
out.
your reaction. Um, you know, I I hate this album. I'm gonna. Yeah, this is. It's. I'm the
Yeah.
controversial one, aren't we? Aren't I? Let's face it. Yeah, I can't stand this album. I'm really sorry. I apologize in advance to anybody who's listening and who's, spitting out their tea, as we speak. Um, I was talking to a fella a while ago, like recently, and he said, "Oh, I really like the Beach Boys," and I said, "Oh yeah, yeah." I said, "By the way, what's your favorite Beach Boys album?" And he said, "Friends," and I was like, "What?" Like Beach Boys fans love this album, and I really cannot understand why, for the life of me. This is not even my most controversial choice, by the way, but
Mm,
it's like what's the Martin Luther quote? "Here I stand, I can do no other." I mean, I just
mm,
can't pretend that I like this album. I think this album
mm,
has nothing about it that's interesting. I only like the first 50 seconds because that's the I think it's called "Meant for You." It's like the vocal introduction.
mm,
I think that's really cool. After that, I just can't stand any of it. And I just don't get it. People say it's my favorite Beach Boys album. It's like, are you seriously saying that this album is better than you know Pet Sounds or something? Uh, I can't get my head around it. Anna Lee the
mm,
Healer is better than you know God only knows. I mean, are you off your trolley? Anyway, whatever.
mm.
So I'm really sorry about that, but that's me 25. I can do no other.
True,
Right,
true.
24, Sean.
I'll discuss. I'll kick back against that later on.
I'm sure you will.
24. Oh my goodness me! I have picked the
Are you, are you
MI.
using are you using actuarial tables?
It's like that. It's like that. It's like the football results coming in. I've got the Maharishi International University album.
Right,
Okay,
right.
um, which it's sort of okay. It's sort of okay, but the cover's quite nice actually on this. That sort of fisheye lens photography. But it didn't do well with the fans. I think it was 151 it reached in the charts. Um, it's sort of all right. She's got rhythm. Sounds a bit like Frankie Valli, I always think. A bit of a throwback sound.
Mm.
But a few songs on there make my skin crawl. I don't like Hey Little Tomboy, for example. That
Yeah,
I
it's got a,
but
it's got a
oh,
weird
it's
lyric, hasn't it? That
creepy,
one.
isn't it? Creepy as hell. It's like a song about
Mm.
grooming or something. I don't like that. I
Mm.
mean, Peggy Sue, the cover is a bit lame. Bells of Paris, Mike Love, that's just awful. I mean, he's like a sort
Are
of
you
creep.
you
He
going to go through the whole track listing?
he's like a sort of creepy uncle going around the world, isn't he, on a sort of non-stop holiday. Uh, Match Point of Our Love. I mean, what can you say about that? It's terrible. I mean, why not do a song about cricket or something, or golf, or any sport? Why Match Point of Our Love?
Yeah,
Terrible.
should just be called Metaphor Song or something.
But I like the cover. I quite like the cover. It's just a shame about the rest of it.
Yeah, covers better than the album, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And he's a bit. I always think Mike Love. He's a bit like George Harrison at this point. I mean, we don't want to hear about um, meditation and the Maharishi at this point. Not in the mid to late 70s. We're a bit tired of it. We want to go roller skating and disco dancing, don't we? And watching Metal Mickey and
Yeah.
Star Wars. We don't want to hear about the
So,
Maharishi. We don't want
Mo-
to
Mork and Mindy.
talk Mindy. Yeah,
That's
that's my
right.
trick.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Also, Mike Love is the most aggressive, egotistical proponent of meditation in history, I think. Um, all right.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, good. We'll
Good.
come back to that one later. Um, but well said. All right. Now, my 24 is That's Why God Made the Radio, 2012. This is not a great album, I don't think. Right, next. No, I think it's not a great album, except, and of course, I'm not the first person to say this, the last four tracks, which
Yeah.
form a sort of suite, and it's deeply moving, that ending. I think that the ending of the album is deeply moving, I think, and sort of fitting into their career, really.
Yeah.
Thank God Brian's back. He's writing, he's on form again. I mean, he really is capable of endless surprises, isn't he, Brian Wilson? Just when you think he's down, he gets back up again, to almost quote Chumbawamba. Um, but I think that those last four tracks they're sort of like that's what Smile should have been like. I mean, that's to me. I like those last four tracks more than I like Brian Wilson's re-recording of Smile later on. Let's not get into that because that's even more controversial. But I just think that like Smile was always an unrealized option, and it's enigmatic for the reason that it literally was never finished. And I'm going to come back to this later on. But I think the way that he was writing on Smile is when he was at his peak. There's an echo of that here, and I just love it. This is where it starts to get the list starts to get more interesting for me, which you'll be surprised by when you see what I've got, what I've got further up the list. All right, nice one. So 23, Sean.
Yeah, 23. I've got 15 big ones. Okay. It's got a bit of synth starting to come in on this, and it's a sort of squelchy synth sound. I'm not overly keen on it.
Hmm.
Reminds me a bit of Big Bottom by Spinal Tap, that sort of squelchy sound. Um,
All right, great stuff. My 23 is the Beach Boys Christmas album from 1964. This must be the tweest mother flipping album in the history of rock. But, great fun.
yeah.
I think it's great fun, this record. I like their sort of, the Beach Boys sort of theme albums, that they do in the 60s. And I mean, the way that they sing on it is amazing, really. Also, again, you've got to remember that they were at their peak, really, at this point. I mean, I think in some ways they were at their songwriting peak. So when the original tracks on this album are actually really good. The problem is that a bit like, what's it called? Still Cruising. It's actually only half an album. A bit like Yellow Submarine by the Beatles. Because it's got a series of covers on side two, which I think are sort of less interesting. But yeah, I've written like Stalin. I'm going to make my second Stalin reference here. People criticize Stalin, but they forget that he was actually, when he was at his peak, his maximum power. That was actually the high point of international communism. It was sort of simultaneously the high point and the low point. That's how I feel about the Beach Boys Christmas album.
Mm.
A stupid metaphor, sorry.
It's
Um,
like international communism.
yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, I wanted to get two Stalin references into my Beach Boys album ranking within 20 minutes. Um, all right, good. Sean, 22.
Okay. 22. I've got the Beach Boys Love You, which is okay. Um, what's it got? Let Us Go On This Way. That's all right. There's the sort of squelchy moog is lurking around, a sort of squelchy moog sound. Few sort of moments that I really don't like Roller Skating Child, Mike Love. I think that's incredibly creepy. Um,
How many
Dennis
times? How many times are we going to use the adjective creepy?
Dennis sings Mona, which is sounds a bit moronic to me. I'm not really. I know he does these sort of gut-wrenching ballads. He has a habit of doing these, but they also the Beach Boys. They do have these songs with sort of quite ordinary women's. I don't mean this. This is not. This is, sorry, don't take offense. But they're very down to earth names. I don't mean anything. You've got Mona, you've got Deirdre, you've got Diane. You
Mm.
know, they're sort of earthy, grounded names, aren't they? Perhaps they're searching for that in their mad their mad life, touring. I quite liked Johnny Carson, the track Johnny Carson. I quite like that. That was quite a delight. Honking down the highway, that's terrible. Ding Dang, that's like a sort of Eurovision Song Contest title. Um, but Brian's still around. He's got a few songs on there. I don't know, actually the song. I bet he's nice, Brian. I thought the keyboard sound was a bit like a sort of cat meowing. I don't know how he did that. That was
Mm.
quite clever. Perhaps he sampled a cat. Could they do that in those days? Um, and then there's Let's Put Our Hearts Together with Marilyn Wilson. That's what I thought of that. So it's all right. It's starting to get better, but not by very much, in my opinion, in 1977.
It's funny. I thought you would have had that higher. I thought
Yeah.
would have tickled your fancy a bit, that one. But fair enough.
I think what it is I heard Roller Skating Child and it coloured my opinion of the album. I mean, maybe I should go back, but not this year.
Yeah. All right. Good. Um,
Right.
Now my 22 again. Brace yourselves. My 22 is Sunflower.
Oh,
Yeah, you see, this is turning into the Genesis ranking all over again, isn't it? Um, Now, again, if you're offended by my opinions, please
yeah, right
write it on a
in.
postcard and send it into Points of
Plain.
View. Um, I'm really sorry. Again, you know, here I stand. I can do no other. I can't force myself to like Sunflower. And again, it's one of those albums that people think is almost the best Beach Boys album of all time, and I cannot understand it. I think it's got one or two moments that are all right. I like the Dennis track that opens it, and I think
Mm.
Brian's what's it called? This I'm going to go from memory here. So this whole world and our sweet love, the two Brian tracks,
Yeah.
I think are all right. I don't think they're the best tracks he's ever done, but I think they're quite charming. But apart from that, I can't cope with it. I don't like the fact that they're all. Well, I don't know. This is a bit of a complicated thing, but I don't like the fact that they're all just randomly chipping in, and I think this is
Mm.
something that kind of haunts them a little bit after their first main period of intense creativity in the '60s. The albums become a little bit of a bricolage, and I think that they had a lot of like good outtakes at this time that were better than the stuff they put on the album, and I can't really understand why. And apparently, the record company said this isn't good enough. You've got to go back to the drawing board, and you've got to get some extra tracks and stick them on there and stuff. And this is one of those ones where you think, yeah, the record company were right here. I'm with the record company on this one.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm very sorry, but I'm just not a fan. I mean, they said that in the British press at the time. The British press said this is their best album since Pet Sounds. It's like, again, I'm sorry. You're saying Deirdre by Bruce Johnson is as good as like the Beach Boys when they were at their creative peak. I mean, I I just the mind boggles. Anyway, so with all apologies, but that's just how I feel. I can't do anything about it. I'm sorry. So, 21. Where are
Right.
you, Sean?
21. Right. 21 is the LA Light album, 79. It's kind of mid, I've written down mid awful. It feels like they've tried. I think the production's very good. I like good timing. Lady Linda is a little bit I like that actually. I quite like that, and it got loads of airplay over here. I don't know if it was a hit, but I always remember like Terry Wogan, who was a famous DJ over here in these parts, Irish. He was always playing that. I quite like that actually. Quite nice. Dennis gets a few more songs, and he's got this sort of developing. He gets this sort of gravelly sort of rock voice, doesn't he? Probably from all the drinking and smoking. But he sort of comes into his own a bit, I think. But the song I really can't stand on here is Sumahama, which is Mike Love, which again I think it's a bit racist. And he's, Sumahama, she's born of a lovely Oriental daughter, and there he is. He's going around the world picking up these ladies.
A
But
lady in
he's
every port.
well, a lady in every port, and I wonder how old he was then. 79. He would have been in his late 30s, 40. Getting a bit tired now, Mike. You need to settle down.
You
Go and
sound
do
like
some
you're you sound
meditation.
you sound like you're putting together a lawsuit. Um,
Yeah,
all right, good. Well, yeah.
good. Right.
Nice. Um, interesting. My 21 is keeping the summer alive. Yes, I've got it above Sunflower. Screw you, everybody. Um, I love the opening track on Keeping the Summer Alive. I love it. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a Carl track. Sorry if I'm wrong on some of the empirical details, but I think it's a Carl track, and I think it's a really good one. Um, I also really like the last two tracks. I think that was something you were saying earlier, Sean. God, I sound like Dennis
Yeah.
Wilson tonight. Um,
Yeah.
Santana Wins and Endless Harmony, I think, is a beautiful end to the album. But
Yeah.
it's true, you do have to sit through a long set of quite terrible songs in the middle. Even Brian isn't on his game here. So, yeah, 1980, Keep the Summer Alive, Keeping the Summer Alive. That's my 21. Sean,
Good.
you're 20.
Yeah, I'd just like to say about 20,
Yeah.
I start to be able to listen to Beach Boys albums quite happily.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, some of them are, epic classic albums, but, I can listen to them. Oh, that's nice. There's not a song on there that tends to make my skin crawl quite as much as some of the later ones. So some of these are interchangeable. I would say the early sort of surfing, cars, girls sort of theme albums, I can sort of interchange basically.
Yeah.
They were sort of a little bit, it was little bit like a Beach Boys factory, I think, to start with. Um, Probably with Murray Wilson heavily involved. So I've got 1962, I've got Surfing Safari, which I think is quite a fun little album. I think that the title track's catchy. It's a bit sort of formulaic surf music, I guess. Um, 10 Little Indians, though, is a little bit, you can't do that now, can you? 10 Little Indians.
Yeah.
Anyway, and do they mean Native American Indians or I'm not quite sure. Then you got Chug-a-Lug. Well, that's a kind of American thing. American listeners, if there are any still listening after Tim's bizarre rankings, if you're still hanging on, what is Chug-a-Lug? That's just chugging chugging some root beer. We don't even know what root beer is over here, do we? Is it made out of roots, plant roots? What is it?
I think it sort of
So yeah,
tastes like detergent.
does it?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's an acquired taste, let's say.
acquired taste. Yeah. Well, you can keep it. We don't want that in the trade deal. We don't want to be forced to drink root beer. We'll stick to tea, please.
This is going to be our next two episodes are going to be about American music. By the way, regular listeners, so stay tuned for more commentary of that order. um, all right, good. That's interesting. I've got that one much higher, but we'll come back to that.
Mhm.
And you're right. There is already a process of alienating Beach Boys fans going on here. Um, but yeah. So my number 20 is Surfing USA. As I said, as you said, I think you're right that there's a sort of a certain interchangeability of some of the early albums. But
Mm.
for my money, Surfing USA is the weakest of them. Um, I think it's basically shite. Except the first two tracks, Surfing USA, of course, the single, and Farmer's Daughter, I think is really good. I think that single shows a real quantum leap in their writing. I mean, they're what they're doing is they're reimagining a Chuck Berry song, aren't they, as a sort of barbershop number,
Mm.
um, and I think it's really original, and in a sense, it shows the difference between them and Chuck Berry.
Mm.
The difference in the sort of artistic vision. Excuse me. So, yeah, but I think the problem with this album is there's too many instrumentals, on it. There's loads of instrumental surfing instrumentals on it, which
Yeah.
are just not much fun for me. And I think the songs on here aren't that great either, basically. So I think this is a big missed opportunity, this one. But I do love the single, as I said.
Yeah.
So let's go to 19. Sean, where you at with 19?
Right, I've got 65's Beach Boys Party, which is sort of all right. I didn't put it high. I mean, I like Barbara Ann. It's got a great sort of vibe to it. I mean, I think everybody knows that song. That's great. You've got a few. It's like that. Maybe they're sitting around a campfire drinking their root beer or whatever they put in it. And so you got a few Beatles covers on there, and you got Tell Me Why, and you got to Hide Your Love Away. It's sort of all right, but to me it feels a little bit contrived and a bit. It's like a sort of flexi disc release, like the Beatles used to give away at Christmas, but they've made a whole album of it. So it's all right, I'll listen to it happily, but I personally wouldn't put it any higher than that.
Yeah. All right. Good. Um, my number. Good. It's an irrelevant comment.
Don't
Um,
agree, but good.
okay, so my number 19 is Shutdown Volume 2. This is
Mhm.
the one I sort of least like of all the early albums that I like, if you see what I mean. Um, the problem I have with this one is I don't really like the sort of biggies on the album. I don't particularly like Fun, Fun, Fun. It's not my favourite of their early singles. It's not my favourite of their great early singles, as it were. Um, I don't really like Don't Worry Baby. I mean, I'm going to get I'd get arrested by the Beach Boys police, wouldn't I? I'd get arrested going
You
through
would, John
customs.
Belushi. Yeah, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. Expect a visit from them.
Yeah, so I don't like "Don't Worry, Baby." I'm sorry. I don't. I think the key changing is weird, and I don't
Mm.
like the warmth of the sun either particularly. I think the key change in it is weird. I'm gonna keep saying that. But yeah, I do like the Denny song. This car of mine. I like the Dennis song on this one. But apart
Mm.
from that, this is not really one of my favourite early albums. All right,
Right.
18, Sean.
18. Yeah, I've got Southern USA. Yeah, I mean I like I like the title track. I think it's got a great guitar sound. Yeah, as you say, it's like a great leap forward, isn't it? Maybe Chairman Mao was involved.
So now we've had two references to Stalin and one reference to Mao. We're going well.
Um, yeah, I think I said Farmer's Daughter was nice vocal arrangements and harmonies. I thought Lonely Sea was a sort of nice, sort of early Brian, sort of slightly melancholic ballad. I thought that was sort of all right. So, yeah, not a bad album. This one.
Yeah. All right, good. I've got 18. I've got Little Juice Coupe.
Mm,
I think this is a pretty weak set. This one. I think it's only marginally better than Shutdown Volume 2. Except the
yeah.
title track. I really like the title track, but that was already on Surfer Girl actually, and it's got uh, "Be True to Your School" on it, which is
Mm.
one in a long tradition of rock bands defending their school. It's completely inexplicable.
Yeah, we'd never do
Um,
it.
it's one of the most inexplicable lyrics I've ever heard. But
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, this is what people don't like about the Beach Boys, isn't it? You know, like not Beach Boys fans, but like the general populace, is that they do songs where
Mm.
they like defending their school and stuff like that. You know, it's that sort of conservatism, you know, which
Mm.
is not so not so well remembered today.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that's my 18, Little Juice Coupe. Not one of their best early albums, I think. All right, 17.
Yeah, funnily enough, that was my number 17, Little Deuce Coupe. It's quite a fun track, Little Deuce Coupe. You know, that was when Mike Love was on the ball, I think, really. Teenage themes, aren't they, really? You know, be true to your school. Essentially, this is like, you know, it could be, you know, you got the car songs on there, haven't you? Cherry Coupe. You know, you could sort of almost give Mike Love a Top Gear magazine and he could tear some lyrics out of it, you know. Um, doesn't sort of pick songs about cars, you know. I suppose you had to be there and so on, but it's sort of its time, you know, that sort of era, that sort of American dream, you know, owning a car, going to the beach, having a surfboard, getting the girl, all that sort of stuff. But it sort of it doesn't age well, I think, you know, as you go on. It's quite charming, but you can sort of see why Brian sort of branched out and wanted to write with other people, really. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the car thing came about because they had to find something to write about after surfing. You know, when the surfing thing was like going off. You know, they were like, "What do we write about now? What about cars?" You know,
Yeah,
I mean, it's a logical step,
yeah.
but not an entirely aesthetically satisfying one. Um, all right, good. My 17 is the MIU album. I think this sort of returns us a little bit to the classical style, at least in the first part of the album. It returns to the classical style, of the Beach Boys, but it's not as good. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I read that Brian Wilson apparently has no memory of recording this album whatsoever, which might be an example of Freudian repression, the repression mechanism. Yeah, but I think it starts really well. This album, I love. She's Got Rhythm. I think it's brilliant. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, so quickly sort of I don't know, it quickly falls in the toilet and never really manages to crawl out again. I mean, what's weird is that again, there's a sort of repeated theme here, but they had a lot of really great outtakes at this time. There's a song called Our Team, which I love, and Still I Dream of It by Brian was an outtake. That's an amazing track. Good Timing, which later came out on the LA Light album. That's a brilliant track, I think. And those
Yeah,
tracks will
not
all hang
bad.
around, but no, they decided to do, yeah, what was it? Match Point of Our Love instead, you know. Um, I just, I think it starts really well, this album, but I think it falls off a cliff pretty fast. That's what I would say. Now, 16, if
Yeah.
you will,
Okay.
Sean.
Yeah. 16. I've got 63 Surfer Girl. Yeah. Title track's quite nice. Surfer Moon's quite a nice Brian song. I like In My Room. I think that's a bit of an early classic, you know, something else going on in the lyrics to that. Is Little Deuce Coupe on there, or is that added on later?
Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah.
Is so
Yeah.
that's sort of been featured twice.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes,
Hmm.
that's right. They put it on two albums. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, Little Juice Coupe and Surfer Girl.
yeah. Um,
I don't know. Yeah,
your summer. Dr-
I don't know why.
Sorry, carry on.
No, I don't know why.
Don't know why. No, don't know why. Your summer dream. I think you know every now and again on these sort of more bubblegum pop albums, you get little glimpses of what's going on in Brian Wilson's head, and you sort of see little,
Hmm.
you know, signs of where it could go. You know, so I put that in that category and probably in my room as well. So yeah.
Right, great. Now my 16 is Carl and the Passions. So tough.
Oh,
I uh, I've written. Does it last 10 minutes? This album. mean, their albums are all short, but some of them you just think this is like this is. I've been listening to this for about 10 minutes. It's finished. I think it's got. I think it's basically no good. This album. It's a real letdown after Surfs Up. I think it's got two good tracks on it. Basically, the opener, "You Need a Mess of Help" standalone, and "All This Is That." I think is awesome.
Mm. Mm.
But apart from that, I think it's fairly the rest of it's either rubbish or quite mediocre. There's a couple of Dennis
Mm.
tracks on side two. One of those sort of the series of Dennis Wilson, I'm dying tracks, which are those sort of like existential whines that he does. They're all right, those tracks, but I don't think they're great tracks. Even they're not. He's capable of much better, I think, Dennis Wilson. They also inexplicably invited two anonymous South Africans to join the band and write quite bad songs. They decided to include. I mean, talk about a lack of focus. I mean, they lose Brian, and then the rest of the band like starts chipping in, and then they think, oh, well, this isn't random enough. Let's invite a couple of other people in to just suddenly write some songs that aren't very good. I mean, I don't know what I don't know what the management were thinking at this point. But yeah, I think there's a definite sort of lack of focus here, I would say. Um,
Mm.
so this isn't an album that I enjoy very much or listen to very much, although I do think the two highlight tracks are really great.
Well,
Okay.
I think the management probably thought they were in a bit of a death spiral,
I think you're
like
right.
with the sort of fan base, because
Yeah.
their image had become so sort of striped shirts, and they were perceived as being
Mm,
really square, weren't they? So I mean, Ricky Fattar and Blondie Chaplin were sort of brought in to sort of
mm,
beat the sound up. But where they found them, I don't know. It's pretty random, isn't it? But
mm.
you know, um, yeah. So that's probably what I'd
Well,
say.
yeah, you're right. I mean, they even
Yeah,
changed the name of the band practically, didn't they, at this point? I mean,
yeah,
it was called,
yeah,
I mean, it's called Carl and the Passions, as if it's
yeah,
like a different band.
yeah.
And it almost would have been better if it had been by a different band,
Mm,
because the
mm,
Beach Boys at this point they're not functional, are they? I mean, that's not quite true because
mm,
um, the album before and the album after are good,
mm,
but this is probably emblematic of the kind of sort of like what's the word, variable quality
mm,
that's going on at this
mm.
point in their career. Sorry, it's been a very long day. I'm having trouble articulating my thoughts.
Yeah.
Let's move on best. So
Okay.
what about 15 then?
15, 15, 15, 15. Goodness, where is it on my crib sheet? I've got Shut Down Volume 2.
Right.
Yeah, you didn't like Fun, 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 did you? It's sort of all right.
Mm.
Um, I do like Don't Baby. I've put, a precursor to Pet Sounds with a question mark. I like The Warmth of the
There's
Sun. I
we-
think
it,
that's an early classic.
in our presentations, our thumbnails and our like in our titles and everything, the question marks do a lot of work, don't they? So they allow us to say whatever we want without actually saying it. Sorry, carry
Um,
on.
so there's a couple of tracks I sort of like that. I can hear the sort of potential. But they're still doing covers. You got Louie Louie on there in Why Do Fools Fall in Love? So it's a mid-ranking album. It's the green shoots are starting to appear.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, good. Yeah. Um, Now my 15, appropriate enough, is 15 big ones. That's a coincidence.
Ah, very good.
I think some of the originals here are really good. Not all of them, but it's got at least three really good
Mm,
original tracks on it. This one, I think, I love them. And yeah, as I say, not all of them are good, and it's got a lot of aimless covers on it. Again, inexplicably, I don't know what they were thinking. Still, Brian's back, which is always good news. And what else have I written on this? Yeah, what was the title about? What the hell is that title about? Not to mention the cover. I mean, what is that? What are they doing? It's like, they've got, oh, we've managed to get Brian, out of his bed and he's working again. Great, great. So, but well, what should we put on the cover of this album? Well, the band are not in their best physical shape. Well,
Mm.
let's stick them on the cover then. Like yeah, perfect. Why not?
Yeah.
So it's very, very sort of very weird sort of production decisions here. Let's say,
Mm.
but yeah, it's got some great moments. This album, I think, and
Mm.
I love the It's Okay, and I think the version of Rock and Roll Music is pretty good as well. And Had to Phone You, I
Mm.
think is great. This that same song, is it called? I think that's a brilliant track. Anyway, yeah, so it's a handful of very nice tracks here. Well, okay, good. 14, Sean?
14, I've got the Beach Boys Christmas album, which I think I put at 14, partly for nostalgia reasons,
Right.
because it's just a fun little throwaway album that
Mm,
I tend to play every year. Little St. Nick is great. I haven't got much else to say about it, but
mm, mm,
it's in that period of the Beach Boys production line churning out albums, I know, but
mm.
I think it's more a nostalgic thing for
Yeah.
me. So I've got to put it somewhere. So it's at 14.
All right, good. Yeah, I've got to put it somewhere. That's the sort of rationale for the whole ranking system, isn't it? Yeah, all right, good. My 14 is the Beach Boys Love You.
Mm.
It's got a handful of tracks on it again that I think are brilliant. But the ones that I don't like, I kind of can live without. Although I do think there's a sort of consistency to this album, which is kind of welcome. Which I welcome. But that doesn't mean that I think it's sort of a good album. I kind of feel like also have that slight. Um, it makes me slightly anxious sometimes, I suppose, because if you like the Beach Boys, then you care about Brian a bit, and it makes me slightly anxious hearing him rasping away and things. It seems almost like the sound of a guy kind of losing his mind a bit. And so it's a kind of a slightly vaguely traumatic listen for me, this one. But I do think it's got a handful of like about four really great songs on it. This one.
Yeah.
Some people think this is a masterpiece. I don't think it's a masterpiece myself. Here I stand, I can do no other. But I appreciate the gesture. Of them putting this album together. I think it was almost a Brian Wilson solo album. I think. All right, 13.
Yeah, 13. I put That's Why God Made the Radio. To be honest, after listening to the sort of late 80s output, um, it was a blessed relief to hear this. Um, I thought the title track was really nice. And yeah, the last three, four songs are really impressive. Summer's Gone is pretty poignant. And it's incredible that they managed to pull this off. I mean, no Carl, because he'd popped off this mortal coil. So the only thing I would say about this, I mean, I can happily listen to this. The only thing I will say is it does sound a little bit like, and it's been commented on that there might be some auto tuning going on with the vocals, and it's got that strange sort of sound on the vocals. Um, so I don't know if somebody could stick this through an AI machine and have sort of classic. I mean, this is almost like an imaginary album. I think this one, if you could do that and bring back Carl and Dennis, it'd actually be quite a reasonable Beach Boys album, I think. So, but I just like it because I think Brian came back and he got this out of his system and they're all together kind of thing. So it's really nice. But yeah, 13 then for this one.
Right. Okay. Good. My 13 is Surfer Girl. It's not actually my favourite of the early albums, but I think it's starting to get really interesting at this point. They're,
Mm.
I think the first side is slightly ropey from my perspective, but the album has got Little Juice Coupe on it, which I think is a brilliant track. And side two has a run of like some of my favourite early tracks by them actually. Hawaii, Surfers Rule and Our Car Club, I think are three really great tracks myself. Um, I think the harmonic developments in those tracks are more. I find them more moving. They deploy the relative minor chords very effectively in those tracks. So this sort of starts to pique my interest a little bit more. This album, and I think that it also starts to make them feel like an album band for the first time. And I think that, as we've discussed before, like as album fans, I think that's again to be welcomed. It starts to get exciting. Like the album as product, as sort of artistic unit, artistic. Like atomic unit, as it were. I think is like quite exciting, really. So that's my thinking on Surfer Girl. Um, okay, number 12, Sean.
Oh, it's starting to hot up now. I've
Yes.
got All Summer Long, 1964. Yeah, it's got I Get Around on it, which is, really, really good. Little Honda's okay. You sort of kind of start to get an idea that something's cooking, I think is the expression in the kind of arrangements and performances. I quite like All Summer Long. Um, I think We'll Run Away, which is a Brian song, it's kind of got a slightly Pet Soundsy vibe going on to it. You've got Wendy, that classic Beach Boys girls name title for a song. Yeah, Girls on the Beach, that's a typical sort of Beach Boys song. So yeah, that's not a bad album. I don't mind that. Number 12 for All Summer Long.
All right, great. My number 12 is 2020. I think this is sort of the beginning of the wilderness years, really. I think that I claimed earlier on that Friends was actually the beginning of the wilderness years, but I
Mm,
think what Friends, for all my reservations about Friends, I think what it does have is it does have a sort of coherence to it. And it's probably the last album for a while that's got that sort of coherence. I think because it's still Brian's vision, pretty much, pretty universally.
mm,
Um, by the time you get to 2020, it's more of a bricolage, really. Like everything they did in this period. And some of it I think is great, but some of it
mm,
I hate. And I think there's sort of no coherence of styles, or anything that would sort of allow you to come even to a final conclusion about whether you like the album or not, because it's such a weird mishmash of stuff. Do you know a painting? I'm going to put you on the spot here, by Hans Holbein called The
right.
Ambassadors. I think it's in the National
Oh yeah,
Gallery,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
and
The
it's got these.
skull.
Yeah, the skull. That's right. And you've got the two ambassadors in the fireplace, in
Yeah,
front of the fireplace,
yeah.
and then as you walk into the room, it's got the skull on the floor, which you don't see from one angle of the room, but you do when you get into the
Mm,
middle. And it was painted like that. It works on different levels. But yeah, it's an example of anamorphosis, isn't it? So basically, that means that like basically you constitute the object according to your subjective position. And I think that. That's a bit how I was thinking. That's how I feel about this album. Like you can never quite make up your mind what you think about the album. It depends on which bit of the album you're listening to. So there's no sort of overall, you know,
mm,
uh, coherence to it. Really, that was a
mm.
laboured metaphor, wasn't it? Bloody hell. Also, it's not helped by the involvement of one of America's most famous mass murderers. Okay,
Oh yes, yeah.
number 11,
Number
Sean.
11, me, I've got the Beach Boys Today, which I think is a big stride towards Pet Sounds. It's got great production. You got Do You Want to Dance? You got Help Me Rhonda, which one of my favorites, I think, of the Beach Boys. Such a great track. Dance, dance, dance. Um, you're starting to get a bit more sophistication in the arrangements. Um, Don't Hurt My Little Sister. I thought there was a quite a high tuned guitar that reminded me a bit of California Girls. That maybe they tried that trick again. I think I think it's, well, I could go on, but I do think this is like a little marker that it's, would I go as far to say that it's like with the Beatles, like you've got Revolver and Rubber Soul leading on to Sergeant Pepper. I'd say it's almost, I should have put it higher. I thought it should have gone, I'm cross with myself.
Yeah,
So there you go.
I sort of wondered that actually when you said it, but
Yeah.
anyway,
Mm.
it's fine. We can always revisit this later on if we have the patience,
Yeah,
or anybody else.
next year it'll be number one.
Um, all right, good. Well, yeah. You see, I think you've got that one too low myself, but I'll return to that theme later. My number 11 is now you're gonna. This is
Gonna hit the roof.
my number 11 is Surfing Safari.
Oh.
Right now, that is weird, isn't it? But
Mm.
I've got again. I'm trying to just be honest about how I feel about these albums. Like this is just my taste. This is whether I like them or not. How they make me feel. It's not really about whether I think, they're sort of. I'm not. There's no meta narrative here for me. It's just album, but I go album by album, and I
Mm.
can't really do anything about how I feel about them. And this, I think, is a really great album, Surfing Safari. I think it's one of the most coherent of the early albums. I can just listen to it all the way through. I really enjoy it. It's almost like the Beach Boys today in the sense that I think it's like almost like a coherent whole in a way that the few albums that come after it are not quite coherent totalities until you get to Beach Boys today, precisely. Which I know is a weird thing to say, but that's how I feel. I think it's great fun, the album. I think it's got a really original lyrics. It's some of the best early lyrics. Um, I think it's like, I think this is like folk music. I think it's like they're doing folk music here, and it's really kind of, it's like it's like the threshold between two different worlds. And I think that this is like folk music, but it's you can tell it's going into a more interesting area. Like they're going to do more interesting things with it, and I really appreciate that. And I think also all the melodies on it have really interesting shapes. There's a quote from Sonia Christina. Do you remember from Curved Air where she said, "You have your whole life to write your first album and 6 months to write your second album." Maybe that applies here. They spent a long time perhaps developing this set. I think that I don't know whether that's true or not, but I think that it's got that feel of like a culmination rather than a sort of an early misstep to me. This album,
Yeah.
so I just love it, and I could listen to this quite a lot and quite happily. This album,
Mm.
Surfing Safari.
Mm.
So that's my number 11. Now
Mm.
we're approaching the top 10.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord. Um, do you want to give us your number 10,
Yeah.
Sean?
Well, I put at number 10 Elton John's favorite Beach Boys album, which is When the Passion's So Tough.
Hmm.
Um, I often wonder, it's a bit like got these two guys that appear, in the Beach Boys to sort of beef up their sound, make them a bit more culturally relevant. I always wonder for Beach Boys fans if it's a bit like, oh God, what's his name? That guy turning up in Yes after Steve Howe,
Um,
another South African. What was his name?
oh,
Can't even remember.
Trevor Rabin.
Rabin. Was it like that for some beach? Like, I'm not listening to this. Some bloody these two blokes, turning up. Was it like that, or I think they did make a quite a good contribution,
Are you just saying that
actually.
because they're South Africans?
I think they did make quite a good contribution to the Beach Boys. It's quite odd, I suppose, that they suddenly appeared. I mean, actually, I saw Brian on his last Brian. I'm on first name terms. Brian Wilson on his will went with Peter. Funny enough, to the Cliffs Pavilion in Westcliff on Sea near Southend.
What the
That's some
hell was what the hell was Brian Wilson?
Brian
How did he?
Wilson
How the
was
hell did he
there.
manage to find himself in Westcliff?
And he had Al Jardine and he had Blondie Chaplin, and they're still there churning out the music. It was great. Brian, I mean, actually, he did pretty well, but he did look at his watch quite a lot during. I think he was probably wanting to get back to his hotel, but at least He was having a go. Yeah, I quite like this album. I like You Need a Mess of Help. Here She Comes. He's a Blondie Chaplin sound. You got Hold On Dear Brother. That's slightly country, isn't it? I like All This Is That. Um, yeah, there's a few skippers on there. But I don't mind it, funny enough. I don't mind this album, but Elton John says this is his favorite Beach Boys album, so that's a bit odd, isn't it? But I wouldn't say it was the best, but I actually quite like it. And I sort, the Beach Boys. I mean, what were they going to do? I mean, they're these guys. Brian's gone AWOL. What are they supposed to do? They've got to pay their rent. They've got mouths to feed. So they were trying. I mean, the period after Pet Sounds, where it all disintegrated, I find that a sort of it'd be interesting to make a film about that period because I sort of find it quite a romantic era for the Beach Boys in a way because they're sort of salvaging these scraps of music and trying to trying to keep the wheels turning, and I think what else could they do? That's what I think. They were still trying to be relevant, but it's hard, isn't it? Your golden period has gone. What what can you do? What can you do? And they sort of, I think they sort of manfully tried to keep the wheels turning. Is my sort of,
Mm.
against the odds. And at times it worked, and at times it didn't. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've said my piece.
I must admit, I didn't realize Elton John liked it. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know what I was thinking. I would have put it higher if I'd realized. Um, all right, good. Well, yeah, you speak very well. You speak very well on the subject, Sean. My number 10 is LA Light album. You know, go figure. Is this what they call a yacht rock album?
Oh, Daryl Hall and John Oates.
Is that what that is? I don't really
Yeah,
even know what
yeah.
yacht rock is, but
If you say that to Daryl Hall, he goes very red in the face and starts hitting things. He doesn't like it.
fair enough. I mean, if this is a yacht rock album, I would say this is a yacht rock masterpiece.
Mm,
I think this is near perfect. This album. It's very weird. Again, I find it very weird that I hold this opinion, but I've listened to this album over and over again over the years, and
mm,
I always enjoy it. I always really enjoy it, and which you can't always say about some of the other albums, even some of the really great early albums. I
yeah.
think this is a really great album. I mean, I say it's near perfect, perhaps because obviously Mike Love's track is pretty shit. I mean, it's written, as I understand it, you've already mentioned it. You said you called it racist, which I think is fine. I was going to say it's written partly in Japanese for his
Mm.
Japanese fiance,
Oh, I
who's
see.
who's
Okay.
actually Korean.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
awful.
great, isn't it? Um,
Oh,
Also, one other thing, I think
mm,
this album answers the philosophical question as to how bad one track has to be to ruin an entire album. Because
mm,
the disco version of Here Comes the Night, the last 10 minutes, is so appalling that it actually, I mean, if it is
yeah.
yacht rock, the yacht's sort of turned
Yeah.
over in the ocean, and they're all, hanging onto the hull at that point.
Yeah.
It is so bad, that track. What were they thinking? I mean, was it, I don't want to get down on Bruce Johnston, but I think it might have been, I think he might have been, culpable there.
Mm,
Trying to come on, lads, let's bring the sound up. Why would Bruce Johnson be speaking in an Essex accent? Yeah, come on, lads, let's bring the sound up to date. Do a nice long disc, do a nice disco number. All right, okay. Maybe we'll just slip it in at the beginning of side two. Fair enough. Yeah, how long is it? 10 minutes. What? So yeah, that's appalling, that track,
mm,
and it almost stops you from putting the album on in the first place. But and I think if I'd had the LP version, I would have very happily played the first side because I love Good Timing, the opening Good Timing. I think I probably would have never played the second side because of that, which is a shame because then you'd miss Dennis's what's it called, Baby Blue, which is an
oh,
absolute masterpiece.
yeah.
Anyway,
Mm,
um, All right, good. Your number nine, Sean.
Okay, number nine. Well, I've got Friends at number nine, 1968. I quite like this album, and this is in my sort of period of the Beach Boys. The ship's sinking, but they're still manning the oars or whatever it is you do on a sinking ship. They're playing on like the Titanic, you
This is
know.
how many ship metaphors are we sinking ship metaphors are we going to do?
And that's what I think they're like the band on the Titanic. They're keeping it going. I, um, I quite like the title track. It's got a sort of a skipping sort of waltz section in there. Um, Little Bird I quite like, which is Dennis, isn't it? I like Busy Doing Nothing. I think that's a sort of a nice little observational song. I always think that's a sort of a maybe a McCartney style song that, it's a song about basically nothing, really. Well, it is busy doing nothing, isn't it? Um, well, is it Mike Love? He's slipped in another song about transcendental meditation, hasn't he? Literally. And it's got a bit of a jazz freak out at the end, doesn't it? Um, yeah, the songs are a bit slighter on this album, but I think it's got a good sound. Maybe it's the vibe of it that I like. I don't know, but yeah, Beach Boys on a sinking ship.
Hmm.
They're having a
Um,
go.
so you like Friends, do you? I mean, you think it's a good album? I
I
mean,
actually quite like it.
yeah.
Yeah, I do actually quite like it. I quite like the albums from this era. I mean, I think there's an element, isn't there? I mean, you had these. Uh, guessing, for you may say that we're getting into this territory, but you've had the peak of Pet Sounds, and the sort of the tight arrangements, and I think that. It's awful to say, isn't it? But you got the band, haven't you, at this point? So everything's letting slip a little bit, even the Beatles, and possibly this is a little reaction to the White Album. I don't know. I don't know where, it's very getting a bit sloppier. I'm not saying it all works by a long chalk, but then, does the White Album all work? I'm not saying it's
Hmm.
as groundbreaking as the White Album, but it's their sort of very little attempt at it,
Yeah.
I think.
I don't know. I have cognitive dissonance, I think, with this album.
Mm.
But yeah, fair enough, no problem. I think you're probably more in line with the Beach Boys fans on that one. I'm going to get slaughtered, but anyway, in the comments. Anyway, fair enough. Now my number nine is All Summer Long, 1964. I think this is the sort of the last and the best of the early albums. Really, I think this is a really great album. Um, I like, yeah, Wendy. Little Honda, I Get Around, the title track. I think it's sophisticated music harmonically. I think it's fun. I
Mm.
think it's just it's got one or two weak spots. They reached greater heights, I think. But I think this is a really fun album. Apparently, Beatles like this one. That's the rumor,
Ah. Mm.
and you can see why it's sort of it's starting to come together here, isn't it? And it's terribly exciting because what comes next is so amazing.
Mm.
All right, number eight, Sean.
Okay. I've got 65 summer days and summer nights. Again, it's a little bit of a pointer album, I think, towards Pet Sounds. We've got California Girls. Help Me Rhonda's on it again, isn't it? They've stuck it on. They must have liked it so
It's all
much.
a re-recording. It's a
Right.
different
Yeah,
version.
yeah, yeah. One must be a single version and one an album version.
That's right.
I tell you what, the song that I really liked and I'd forgotten about is Girl Don't Tell Me, which I really enjoyed listening to and had it on repeat. I really liked it. Don't know why, I just thought
I think
that's good.
that one sounds Beatlesy. I think that one it
Well,
sounds like a Hard Day's Night type one. I think.
yeah, perhaps that's it. It was an earworm for me. Just, Amusement Park USA is a little bit dated,
Mm.
isn't it? But I'm bugged at my old man, an early poke at Murray, I suppose, at Dad.
Hmm.
But I quite like this album in general, so yeah, I put it in at eight.
Great. My
Mhm,
eight is Holland.
mhm.
Um, I think it's got, first of all, I think it's got lots of epically great songs on it. And I also think it's unusually coherent for the period. which is ironic because after that they essentially split. They went into a completely different phase after this. But I think it's you can listen to this as a coherent album, unlike say Carl and the Passions. And I think the songs are really, really great. The only thing is that I think that it collapses at the end. I think the last few songs are basic. I don't like them at all. After Trader, again, they got the other guys, the new guys writing stuff, and I'm not into it. And I also don't like Brian's suite, which was a sort of, I think was included as a sort of flexi disc, as you would say. I can't remember what it's called. Mount Vernon Mount
Fairway.
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 That's right. Yeah, which I think is a George Washington reference, isn't it?
Right.
I always think it sounds like a South Park episode, that track. Um, but yeah, I think this is a surprisingly coherent band effort from the period, and it's got some really great stuff on it. I think it's very impressive. This was one of the times where the British critics, I think, I got it right because they said that they're really back here. This is a really good
Yeah.
effort. But as I say, this was sort of the end of an era, really. This one, so this is the end of the as I called it, the wilderness years. But like I think it's a pretty sort of they've worked up to something here, as it were.
Mm.
All right, number seven.
Seven for me, I've got Wild Honey, which I think it's got some great tracks on it. It's got Darling, hasn't it? I really like Let the Wind Blow, which is appeals to me.
Mhm.
Sort of kind of, would you call it lo-fi? I don't know, but I'd say slightly feels a bit rushed together. You got a few covers on there, which to me, well, I Was Made to Love Her, which is great. That was Stevie Wonder, wasn't it? A great version of it, but why do it? That's my sort of. Oh, it's like we're a track short. Oh, I like Stevie Wonder. Let's do albeit a very good version of it, but
I think that was more or less
maybe.
exactly the thought process. What you
Ah,
just said
right,
there.
right, right, right. So it
You
spoils
sum
it
you
a bit.
summarised that well.
But I think, Darling, that's a great song. I like Wild Honey. Yeah, good, 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 good.
Well, my number seven is Wild Honey. High
Oh,
five. I think this is the last solid, original, and coherent album from the classical period, basically. I think it's really good, this album. I love it. Again, it's a bit short. And you're right, there's points where it feels a little bit rushed, but I think it basically works really well as an album again. I think
Mm,
it's curiously underrated,
yeah,
as an album. It's sort of half forgotten, isn't it? But I think it's not by Beach Boys
yeah,
fans, obviously, but by
yeah.
the general rock audience. And I think that's a shame. And as you say, it's lo-fi, but I think that was the point, really. They were
Yeah.
out of the psychedelic period, and then they were going to do something a bit more back to basics, and all the bands were doing that at that time. In fact, they were one of the first to do it. Really, to be fair, they did it before the Beatles, as
Mm,
usual. You know.
mm,
So yeah, that's my seven, Wild Honey.
okay, good, good.
Um, your six, Sean.
Number six, I've got 2020. Now, I really like Do It Again. I think that's like for 69. It's a bit of a throwback then, isn't it? I think this sort of lyrically, but I think it's produced really well. It's got that great sort of snare sound, hasn't it? I don't know what they did to that drum, but it's sort of iconic, I think that.
Mm.
Um, you got I Can Hear Music, which is quite lush. Um, I quite like there's a few sort of fillery tracks I'd say on this, but I think I like I Went to Sleep. I think that's quite a sweet little song. However, has, as you mentioned earlier, it's got oh God, it's got that awful one, hasn't it? The Manson song, hasn't it? No, what's it called? It's not Cease to Exist, is it? It's something
Uh,
like that, isn't
it's
it?
called
What's it? How's it?
Never Learn Not to Love. Is it called?
And Not to Love,
Mm.
which when I found out about that, put the wind up me, and I've got a little story to relate about that, which Tim knows. I was living in Brentwood. We were renting. Sorry, I'm going to get done for self-indulgence, but it'll make sense. I was having a bath Now we had an upstairs flat, and there were some stairs to the lounge, and in the lounge was my stereo, and I was kind of going through a phase of listening to all these post Pet Sounds albums. So I had 2020 on, and I knew about this link to Charles Manson, and the damn CD player got stuck on this song, repeating the lyric, which would have been ceased to exist, but it was changed, wasn't it? And I leapt out of the bath where you'd never see me move as quick. Uh, towel, dripping water everywhere.
You paint quite a picture.
It was, and I pulled the plug out of the socket with I nearly electrocuted myself because I was so shitted up, I think is the phrase we would use. And I always skip this track.
Mm.
So yeah, but otherwise I got it's got Our Prayer on it, hasn't it?
The
Cabernet.
bad vibes, man.
Bad vibes, bad vibrations. Yeah,
Bad vibrations.
but it's got Our Prayer on it, that great section, Who Ran the Iron Horse. But again, they're the splinters, they're it's like the shrapnel from Smile, isn't it?
Mm.
On across all these albums, the magic, little bits of magic fairy dust on these albums.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a nice way of putting it. The smile shrapnel.
Mm, yeah.
I'm glad you told that anecdote about getting out of the bath because that's why people tune in, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
All
Cool.
right, good. My number six is Beach Boys Party.
Okay.
I mean, again, uh, what am I thinking? No, it's just I think this is like a concept album. I think it's a
Right.
wonderful concept album, and the concept is joy. Which is an underrated emotion in rock. I think there's a sort of oscillation in this period, the period of the Beach Boys' career between absolute depression and
Yeah.
absolute joy, and I think it's almost manic depressive, isn't it? In that sense. Um, they do have that sort of side to them, the Beach Boys, that kind of like up and down, up and downness. Um, I just think the person who came up with the idea for this album is just a genius. I think the arrangements are incredible. I think this is sort of one of my favourite rock albums of all time, in a way. Every time I feel a bit down, I put this on and I feel great. And I
Mm,
don't apologise for putting it this high because I think it's a real triumphant experiment, really. It's the third of their 1965 masterpieces, from my point of view. And it's really the last of the hit albums, I think, curiously. Again, I think the public, everyone said, oh, the public couldn't cope with the Beach Boys when they got sophisticated. But it's like, in a way, the public sort of were right. Like when they were in their sort of like commercial phase, in a way that was when their music made most sense. And when they go into the sort of more self-indulgent stuff, I hate to align myself with the axis of evil, the public, the record company, and Mike Love. But I think that there's a sort of logic to what those people were saying, and I think this is a real high point of their career in a way.
mm,
I mean, I only didn't put this higher because I'm slightly scared, if I'm honest, of offending Beach Boys fans. But it could have almost gone higher for me. I thought putting
mm,
this above Pet Sounds was probably a step too far. But
mm,
I did contemplate it just from the point of view of another controversial album ranking. Because a
yeah.
little bit of me, I have the imp of the perverse in me, as Edgar Allan Poe would say, and so I kind of like probably what's it, épater le bourgeois, la bourgeoisie or whatever they say. But there is a limit. I'm not completely suicidal. So yeah, at number six, Beach Boys Party.
Mm,
All right,
mm.
so five, Sean, please.
Okay, yeah, interesting. I mean, you risk getting whacked with a surfboard, I think, really. Okay, hang on. What number are we doing? Number five.
Five, yeah.
Five is Sunflower. Um,
Here we go.
well, I think it could have been a great album because there are some really decent tracks on this. You got This Whole World. I like Cool Cool Water. All I Want to Do. I like it's a sort of throwback Beach Boys. I really like Our Sweet Love, which is Carl. I think he sings that really nicely. But the problem with it is um, Tears in the Morning and Deirdre. And maybe I skip those and enjoy the rest of the album. And this might be why I like it so much, but yeah, I don't know now whether I should have put it quite as high as that. But I do like it. I do like it. But yeah, I'm not keen. Tears in the Morning, I think is shocking. It's so sort of schmaltzy or something. But there you
Yeah.
go. I put it at 5. I've got to stand by it.
A follow-up question presents itself to me, but I think maybe I'll hold off because I think we will
Okay.
come back to it.
Yeah.
Also, we need
Okay.
we need to get on with it.
We
Um,
do. Yeah, we do.
my number five again, sue me, is Pet Sounds. Right, that is the appropriate reaction. Um, I think I've got a lot of to say about this album, but this isn't the moment. In fact, maybe we could do an episode on this because I think, although I think Peter vetoed it, but anyway, that's another story. Um, I've got a lot to say about this album. I'll try and get through it as quickly as I can. I think that there's one of the things that occurs to me about this album is that I think the Beach Boys are hardly present here,
Yeah.
and I think that so it's a bit like a Brian Wilson solo album, which is not necessarily a bad thing because Brian Wilson is amazing. But I think it's also like a solo album in the sense that some of the songs I think are quite weak. They're not quite as good as they could be because, as you would expect on a solo album, because there's no committee. You know,
Mm.
I can see how this album sort of precipitates Sergeant Pepper a bit because there's got that musique concrète right at the end. There's a lot of very nice experimental stuff going on here. But I don't think this is such a great album as a lot of people say. I don't think there's. I think it's sort of. I think the good moments here are absolutely astonishingly good. But I think there's only three or four of them, and the rest of the album I think is slightly, uh, from my taste, just from my own personal perspective, I think they're slightly weak. And again, I find there's no common denominator between the good tracks and the bad tracks,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And I think it's partly a problem of like the programming. When Wouldn't It Be Nice comes in, I think it's beautiful. I think it's an amazing track. The key change in the middle and the time change, and everything. I think it's so ahead of its time. It's so wonderful. And then the second track is You Still Believe in Me, right? And I
Mm.
don't like that track at all. I think that's a really boring, harmonically and melodically boring track. And so it interrupts the flow of the album for me straight away. And there's at least five, possibly six other tracks on this album that I don't love harmonically. I think that they're not quite interesting enough. And I'm really sorry again, but that's
Mm.
just
Mm.
how I feel about it. And I think this is interesting. This was the first misfire from the point of view of the critics and the public. Not so much the critics perhaps, but the public. And
Mm.
I'm really sorry, but I don't think that's an accident, right? So, you know, bloody hell. Um, Sean, number
Didn't,
four.
didn't we loved it in the UK though, didn't we?
Well,
Pet
the
Sounds?
UK, yeah, the UK
Yeah.
loved it, yeah,
Yeah.
because I think they appreciated the fact that they were trying to progress. It was a
Yeah.
progressive album, which
Yeah.
everyone was into here at that time. I say
Mm.
here, I live in
Mm.
Spain, but I
Mm.
hail from Blighty, the UK.
Mm. Mm.
But I think, yeah, I think it's sort of, I think actually this was a sort of interstice, this album. But I won't say too much because I'm going to come back to that later.
Mm. Mm.
Sean, do you want to give us your four?
Okay, number 4, I have got Smiley Smile, which I think's another Beach Boys on the sinking ship, but making a good fight of it. Um, it's got heroes and villains on it, which is amazing. We've got good vibrations on it. It's got wonderful on it. Um, I think some of it feels a bit like, they're demos. I'd say production wise.
Mhm.
Um, with me tonight, little pad. So I did really do like it actually. But it's sort of an album that again I sort of think, it could have been a bit better than it is, but it's still good and it's still the Beach Boys and I like it. And it's got to go somewhere. So there you go.
Yeah. As Paul McCartney would say, it's the bloody Beach Boys,
Exactly,
stop complaining.
exactly.
All right,
Yeah.
good. Lovely. Yeah, my number four is the Beach Boys today. Yes, I've put it higher than Pet Sounds. I can do no other. I think this is a masterpiece. I think this is their first masterpiece
Yeah,
and one of their few masterpieces. The best thing you say about the Beach Boys is that they have several masterpieces, and I think this is one of them. Again, I think it's a concept album. Um, I think it's sort of it's a sort of a more introspective album, but it's not all like melancholic or it's kind of like subjectivist like Pet Sounds is. It's got a rocky side one basically, and it's got a sort of more reflective side, which is side two, which I think is a really nice idea programmatically, and I think it's the two sides of the Beach Boys as well, of course, but they're not neglecting either of them. I think it's a sort of in that sense a slight prelude to Pet Sounds, I suppose. But I think that this is an unmitigated masterpiece. Is that the right way of putting it? It's not quite, is it? But anyway, you know what I mean. I think that for me, Pet Sounds is like this. It's like this sort of listen, and I think the Beach Boys today is like it's solid all the way through. I
right.
think it's a really solid listen, and I love this album. Again, don't play Pet Sounds that much, but I play this album more than I play Pet Sounds. I like it more, and so I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel. I should stop apologizing, but I feel like
Yeah, yeah.
it's perhaps warranted. All right, number three, Sean.
Good. Yeah, I've got surf. Hang on, where are we? Are we number three? God, I'm lost in the mix. I'm lost in the mix. Um, I've got. Sorry, no, I've got Surfs Up.
Right.
Um, I really, really love Long Promised Road, which is the Carl track. They're starting to they've got that sort of Moog or Moog loop under Carl's vocals. Surfs Up is amazing. Brian, and I think is Carl singing that.
Which one? Sorry.
Is Surfs Up being sung by Brian or Carl? Because I always get
I,
them muddled.
I think it's both of them.
Right,
Um,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. They're
because
kind
I
of
think
just
that they're singing at the
yeah.
same time,
You can't
or it's Carl double tracked on the first
right.
bit and Carl and Brian on the second bit. Can't quite
Yeah.
remember, but yeah,
They've just got such great voices.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I till I die. That's sort of God. That's a track in itself, isn't it? It's sort of showing Brian's disintegration, I think. But there's something just incredible about that song. Um, it's got a day in the life of a tree on it, hasn't it? Which is Jack Ryan. Early environmentalism, I put here. Early environmentalism with a question. Very 70s. I mean, I don't know, 70s theme. Well, it should be, let's be honest, we should care about the trees, the
Yeah.
planet's lungs and so on. But what lets this album down for me is the absolutely execrable student demonstration time. I just think it's bloody awful. So, this could have been an absolutely incredible album, I think. I mean, it is good. It's the bloody Beach Boys. I can't stand that. And I don't really like Disney Girls, but which is Brian Johnson, which is probably some Beach Boys fans' favourite, one of their favourites, but just find it a little bit sugary sweet. It's probably quite nice, really, but it's not for my taste. But I tell you, I love the cover, the painting, the Indian brave, the warrior. He's like in the pouring rain on his horse, looks thoroughly beat. And that's kind of the mindset I think of the Beach Boys at that point. Oh God, we've got to get back to our roots.
Back to
Uh,
the beach.
back to the beach. But yeah, there you go. Yeah, love it. Despite a couple of weak tracks.
Great. Now, my number three is Summer Days and Summer Nights, 1965. I think this is perfect, this album. I would almost put this at number one, but there's two that I
Ooh.
like even more than this one. I think this is perfectly put together, perfectly programmed. It's got three lovely singles on it. One of them's a cover, but actually, it's a really original arrangement because they were really good at arranging stuff, the Beach Boys. And so I think the three singles are awesome, and all the album tracks are awesome as well. And they're they're a lot. They're what's the word? Arranged? Is that the word? Arranged? Arraigned? In that's not the word, is it? They're placed in the perfect order, I think. And I think I like the fact that this is a much more up album, a much more sort of even funny in places, and as I say, joyous. Because I think I prefer the joyous side of the Beach Boys more than the sort of introspective side in the end.
Yeah.
But I'm not dogmatic on that point. But yeah, I just think this is wonderful. This album, if I had to choose this or Pet Sounds to take to a desert island, it would definitely be this album, not Pet Sounds, right?
Mm.
Um, Sue me. Okay, so number two, Sean.
Yeah, my number two is 1973's Holland, which I really like, and I've got this album on vinyl, and something about it I just really love. I think it's sort of like, as you say, it's that last. It's going out on a high in that sort of period post Pet Sounds. Sail on Sail, I really like. I love Steamboat. It's very evocative. I think it's very. It's probably you're getting into that real Americana, what they call Americana these days. But
Mm,
maybe that's what I love about it.
mm,
Trader, I think, is absolutely bloody fantastic. Carl Wilson's
mm.
song. Um, and I think, Blondie and Ricky Fattar, the thing that they bring to this band is, I mean, that I think Blondie Chaplin is a good kind of rock vocalist. He gives them a bit of oomph. And Ricky Fattar, Dennis Wilson's an all right drummer. He's a sort of a garage stroke surf rock drummer. I think Ricky Fattar's a really good drummer, and I like actually like oh, what track is it? Oh God, my brain's gone to mush. It's late. I like Leaving This Town. It's nothing like the Beach Boys, really, is it at all? It could be another band, but I like that. I like that sort of groove that goes on with the drums and it's a drummer thing. It's probably a drummer thing, and there's a sort of a Moog riff underneath. It sounds very early 1970s, but I love that. I dig it. I dig it. I get where it's coming from. Um, California Saga, a little bit self-indulgent with the stuff about eagles and eating scorched meat and stuff like
Is
that.
it Walt Whitman?
Uh, could be, couldn't it? Could be. Yeah. But I guess, they're
Are you
linking.
are you calling Walt Whitman pretentious?
Oh dear. Um, Yeah, I mean Mount Vernon and Fairway is reminds me. Do you remember Sparky the Magic Piano? Do you remember?
I think just about,
They,
yeah.
they, they used to play it at school
Right.
along with Puff the Magic Dragon. Well, I'm old enough to remember that. It's like a sort of introduction to music for children with learning difficulties or something like that. But
That's a
I sort
really
of like.
that's a really universal reference there. I'm sure the international
Um,
audience will enjoy that.
But I like this album, and I think they desperately tried to sort of stick a boot up the Beach Boys' backside, but it didn't work, and I think it's a real shame. But there we are. I've put it in at number three. I think it's an album that's gained a bit of favor in probably recent times. I think people have come to rediscover it, and perhaps with a bit more like perhaps if it wasn't put out as the Beach Boys, it might have done better. I don't know at that point. I think, you couldn't, they were deeply uncool. I think this was what the problem was, marketing wise. But we love them because we love them because that's who they are. Who cares if they're not cool or wearing the right trousers?
Good point. I think
Yeah.
what's that Monty Python? Do you remember the Monty Python film? Is it The Holy Grail where John Cleese is playing a
Mm.
knight, and every time they ask him to do something, he
Mm.
says, "Can't do that. It's not in my idiom." I think that's a bit like
Yeah.
those songs by was it Blondie Chaplin or the other one?
Yeah.
Yeah, they,
Ricky
the
Guitar.
Ricky Furtado. Sorry, the Ricky.
Yeah.
They it's like. Yeah, right. There's a good song. It's not in our idiom, like, sorry,
Yeah,
that was a bit
yeah,
laboured, wasn't it, that joke?
yeah.
All right, good. Well, listen.
Ricky Fattar played George Harrison in the Ruttles film.
Oh, yeah, right. Yes, that's true,
Yeah,
isn't it? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So there's another Monty Python reference for you
yeah.
folks. Um, now, my number two is Surf's Up.
Mhm.
I think this is pretty much a perfect album. It's only slightly ruined. This is funny. We're on the same page here. Only slightly ruined, as usual, by Mike Love's terrible track. At the end of side one, student demonstration time. I mean, if you can't write, then don't do a rubbish cover and ruin everyone else's efforts. It's so egotistical, isn't it? Um, and there's sort of some great outtakes from this time that didn't make it onto the album because they didn't even include all the brilliant songs that they had as outtakes, which includes some great Dennis Wilson tracks, a
Yeah.
couple of great Dennis Wilson tracks, which were all on that box set that came out recently. Feel Flows was it?
Oh,
There's so much great
yeah,
outtakes, the Beach
yeah,
Boys. So it could
brilliant.
have been even better, this album.
Mm.
They didn't need to include that Mike Love track. Also, again, I think the fact that it's still a bit of a bricolage kind of makes me uncomfortable. But
Mm.
track for track, I think my less student demonstration time. I think this is an amazing listen. This, um, and also echoing what you said, I've written here. He even has a beautiful cover. You know.
Mm. Mm.
So that's right. It's a real it's a real like this is almost like could have almost been their best album of all time if it
Yeah.
had been like a little bit more slightly more coherent. I think they could have made it even more coherent with the outtakes actually because it's got
Mm.
their comedy bits on it and then some very serious bits. Again, like Today and some of the other
Mm.
albums. And I think that this is, I think that it could have worked perhaps even better programmatically than it did, but I'll take it as it is because I love it. And of
Yeah.
course, Surf's Up I think is one of the best pop songs ever written. It doesn't. I don't think it belongs on this album. I don't think they necessarily even needed it. They could have ended with Till I Die,
Yeah.
but just the fact that they completed it and it's so amazing, I think is pretty it's special, isn't it?
Mm.
Now, it's been quite a night, hasn't it?
Oh, marathon.
A marathon. Um, will you tell us? I mean, anyone can work it out, but
Yeah,
will you tell us what your number one was,
the
Sean?
only one left is
The only
Pet
one left.
Sounds, which I really like. I still like to this day. I think it's better than Sergeant Pepper, to be honest. I think it's
What?
better than
Sorry,
Sergeant Pepper.
what album did you say? Because I missed it.
Pet Sounds.
It
Pet
sounds-
Sounds. Um, I think do you know what it is that I think I like about this? It's the musicianship on it and the sound of it. That's a bit of a craft sort of thing. Maybe that appeals to my brain, a sort of like attempt to make things. I think it's a finely crafted and arranged album.
Finely wrought.
Finely raw, and that's what I like. I like the musicianship of it. You know, but God, the songs on it, are just incredible. You got Wouldn't It Be Nice? You've got God Only Knows. As you say, those would be your tracks that
Hmm.
are up. But see, I like You Still Believe in Me. I think I think it's got a great sound. I like it's probably the percussive side of it, this sort of orchestral, maybe the percussive side of things. I really like. I like it. I like Sloop John B. I think that's probably Al Jardine's big moment, his greatest moment. Obviously, God Only Knows. That's bloody incredible. Carl singing that. Um, I like the section on Here Today that's got that wonderful organ part, and you've got is it Carol Kay on the bass?
Hmm.
Um, I, I love it. Um, I think also, you've got Hal Blaine playing on this. Probably the first time I've mentioned Hal Blaine, but I love his drumming on this album. It's just so wonderful. So for me, it's probably like a finely crafted thing. And it's strange, isn't it? America didn't like it, but we embraced it. I mean, they came over, didn't they? And Bruce Johnston. They sent Bruce over. and played it to John Lennon and one of the monkeys, didn't they? Something like that, you know. Um, Paul McCartney likes it, so you know, if Paul likes it, you know, I can't argue with him. So that's my case for Pet Sounds.
Great. Well, maximum respect, as they say, because I think, someone had to choose it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you can work out what mine is. My number
Oh
one is,
God.
but it's Smiley Smile.
Hmm.
Um, I did another video about this. My argument was that actually this is Smile in the sense that this is actually like the closest the Smile got to being finished because the
Yeah.
Smile tracks that are on this album are actually completed in a way that they weren't completed when Smile was sort of mooted, right?
Yeah.
And we could have a big argument, not to say fight about that, but I think
Mm.
there's enough of a Smile imprint on this record that I bloody love it. And
Mm.
I think this could have been the comeback after Pet Sounds, possibly.
Mm. Mm.
It wasn't in the end for one or two reasons which I'll get to,
Mm.
but I think that partly in terms of mood, I think this is like we're smiling again now. Like this is a fun
Mm.
moment, which I think is what their trademark was really. Um, I think the reason why it's not wasn't a comeback is partly to do with the sort of inconsistent. I think you mentioned this, the inconsistent production and inconsistent conceptualization. Because some of the tracks have higher production values than others. Specifically, good vibrations, which is really next level, isn't it? Um,
Mm.
I remember my dad. I wasn't going to tell this story, but it just occurred to me. My dad went to music college. He got a degree in music. That's how he, his sort of like his professional career began. He's not a musician. Didn't become a professional musician, but he's semi-pro, let's say. But he got a music degree from music college, and they just specialise in classical music. This was late 60s, but they never listened to any pop music at all. He said, but one day the teacher came into the class, the lecturer came in and just put Good Vibrations on and said, listen to this. This is the future of music. And this is people who were listening to Boulez, and things like
Yeah.
that. So I think that the fact that this has got good bloody vibrations on it is enough of an interesting point in itself. But apart from that, as I was saying, it's slightly flawed in the sense that the rest of the album is quite lo-fi, and so it loses something in terms of coherence, as it were. But I think it's still a masterpiece, and it's the Beach Boys album that I think it's the first Beach Boys album that I think it's the first Beach Boys album that I bought on LP, and I loved it immediately, and it was really sort of opened the door to the whole Beach Boys career for me, and it still has a special place in my heart, and I still love it, and I think it's incredibly consistent. I don't think they made any album really which has got a better set of tracks on it really. Partly, as I say, because it's got Echoes of Smile on it, which could have
Mm.
been a different proposition, but the tracks were never finished. I think we have to just accept that. And this is like the closest we've got to a sort of finished version of Smile, and it's I'll take it, as they say.
Mm. Mm.
Now, unless you have anything else to add, my friend.
No, no, I think it's all been said and done.
So it's all been said and done. So, how many Beach Boys fans do you think are still watching?
I thought you were going to, how many Beach Boys fans did it take to change the light bulb?
All right. So my message to any Beach
Uh,
Boy fans that are watching is, fire at will. We've done what we can, to annoy you. Let's see if it worked. So remember to before we go, remember to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've seen. I mean, if you haven't enjoyed it, don't like and subscribe. That'd be weird. But we'll see you on the next edition of Crapper, which I think will be next week. It's going to be, as I said, more Americana. I think won't say what it is yet, but it will soon become clear. It'll become clear later on. Like the French Revolution. All right. I thought I'd end on a revolutionary reference since we started with so many. So thanks very much for your help, Sean.
that's all right. I'm going to go and grab my surfboard now and jump in a lake.
Jump in the pond. Um,
Yeah.
and it's goodbye from me, and we'll see you on the next edition of Crapper. So,
Okay. Bye.
ta